everybody, this is the Week Trend. So, I have been saying for years that I am so sick of the fact that Hollywood is keep making, sequels and prequels and remakes and reboots and just, using these IPs to treat out an, conveyor belt of crap rather than, making nice and original stuff. Essentially, Hollywood, please make something original, outside of the studio system that, hampers all of these filmmakers. Hollywood's answer was, here is Moonfall. Also me, not like that. So we have a lot to talk about today, so let's not waste any time, shall we? This is my perhaps very long review of Moonfall. In the distant future of the year 2011, in space, we have a space shuttle where we have Patrick Wilson and Halle Berry, who is arguing with each other about, Toto's Africa. That is one of the few occasions in this movie where all of the dialogue in this movie does not come out as, crap or forced or extremely clunky. And they're also accompanied there by a bunch of space-related red shirts. Watch out there, you're probably going to get killed in a second and be collateral damage to this thing that's going to happen, because there is this gigantic space tornado thingy that comes out of nowhere and destroys the shuttle and kills everybody except, of course, for Barry and Wilson. However, the fact that they cannot find any evidences of the, tornado thingy, and Wilson is disgraced and he is penniless and homeless, and he also gets a divorce thing slapped onto him. Oh God, we're going to do another horrible divorce thing in a disaster movie directed by Ronald Emmerich. Say it ain't so. No, it actually ain't so, because we're not getting one, we're getting two. Two? Yeah, because Halle Berry is also having, problems in her marriage and is now also divorced because, her husband, by the way, is working for the government. That will be important later. Well, goody. Anyway, 10 years passes and Wilson is still, on the outs with NASA, and is still broke, busted and disgusted with a motorcycle, a sports car and a wristwatch from Omega. What? Priorities, man. You're 3 months behind rent. Do something. You have, things to, turn your life around with. Priorities, man. Priorities. Anyway, so his wife has, moved on with Michael Pena, who is selling cars, and, his son is having problems with the law and he's making a mockery of himself, in courts and stuff like that. And I was thinking at this point, please, can something happen? This is horrendously boring, and I'm just so sick of these characters that are so shallow and so terribly cliched and are so unoriginal. Please show me something new and something original. Well, finally, actually something starts happening, because the moon is starting to, go out of orbit and is starting to approach Earth. Well, that is at least something, I thought, when that thing happened. So, what is, NASA going to do about this? Well, they're trying to send this kind of, space shuttle up towards the moon, but the moon is taken out by the same, tornado that took out the last one 10 years ago. And also, it had, this weird tentacle things that is coming out. Huh? Come again? Yeah, weird tentacle things from this black gooey stuff. That seems to be some kind of a nanobot thing technology. It seems like it is protecting the moon from us or something like that. At that point I thought, this is kind of odd, this is kind of weird, where are we going with this? Unfortunately, this will also see the appearance of CK, which is a conspiracy theorist sort of a dude who has a theory that the moon is not actually a moon, but it is a megastructure that has been created by aliens. Can you say that again? What? Megastructure, aliens. Okay, I thought at this point, this is kind of odd. I cannot see where they're going with this thing because, you know, as the moon is getting closer to Earth and it's going to enter our atmosphere, it's going to break up in, you know, smaller pieces, and this thing is going to, you know, pound the Earth into pieces. So we are kind of shit out of luck here because apparently the moon is going to fight us for some reason. Then out of nowhere, Donald Sutherland shows up. Slightly embarrassed to be in this movie, I am sure of, and he says that, you know, I'm guarding these secrets about this thing that I have been kept secret for all these years, but everything it took, you know, was, you know, asking politely, and he, you know, tells him about the very, very classified information about this, because apparently this thing has been going on for decades, but the only person who has seen it and survived it and has been able to tell anybody about it is actually, you know, Wilson. Apparently, this thing that is circling the moon is some kind of a force that does not like technology. So they think that if they take this kind of old-timey spacecraft and it goes up there, that might, you know, fool the damn thing, so they can, you know, go in and see what is inside the moon, and they can stop it from, you know, killing all of us and stuff like that. And that is essentially sort of kind of what this movie is about, but we'll get to all the other crappy storylines that we also have in this movie in a second. So, at this point, I thought to myself, this is not very interesting. Not even, you know, the obligatory destruction thing that is happening isn't even mildly entertaining, because I've seen it before and it used to be a lot more interesting and it used to be a lot more spectacular and awesome. There are no awfully awesome destructions like we had in Armageddon and stuff like that. And because we also have to shoehorn in Wilson's family into this thing, and Halle Berry's family for that matter, because, you know, Wilson's son, Barry's son, and a Chinese exchange student for some reason, you know, is going to Colorado to try to reunite with Michael Pena there. And they get into all sorts of troubles with local assholes who are trying to steal their cars and do all sorts of heinous stuff and stuff like that. And this is all sorts of boring and uninteresting, and can we please get anywhere? Because I thought when we were, you know, leaving Earth that we were going to focus on what was going to happen, you know, with Barry and Wilson and CK, who for some reason is, you know, coming along with them despite having no formal astronaut training or whatever. But it worked for Bruce Willis, so it can work for this schlub anyway. So at this point, as I said, I had no idea where we were going with this thing. And sometimes I see movies where, you know, at some point they go into, you know, a different direction. They can sometimes make a rather, you know, hasty left turn or a right turn, or they can, you know, go up a hill I didn't see coming. This thing went into essentially a roller coaster, because the entirety of the third act of this movie was completely insane, and things got stupid, and it got stupid really fast. The longer this movie went, the more ludicrous everything went, and the more insane the whole story went. And Halle Berry, who is kind of terrible in this movie, and Patrick Wilson, who is also not at his best in this movie, had to say increasingly dumb things. And I said to myself at this point, this couldn't possibly be any more stupid, or it couldn't get any less interesting. But then they threw at us a million cop-outs towards the end, where nothing made any sense, and nothing of these, you know, sacrifices and stuff that they made, you know, any impact whatsoever, because they were almost nullified, all of them. So thanks a lot for that. And considering that, you know, Ronald Emmerich made a pretty big deal of that this was going to be, you know, a big adventure that was going to be an original movie made outside of the studio system, it is a very unoriginal movie. It feels like he has stitched together like 25, 30 different types of movies into one Frankenstein's monster who very, very slowly was walking towards sequel baiting, sequel baiting. After all that we have been through, after all of these asinine nonsense that you've thrown at us, you have the gall of you, sir, to actually deliver a sequel baiting to us. Are you insane? Have you seen the last time that, anybody did a sequel to a Ronald Emmerich movie? It didn't turn out very well, did it? Oh, Jesus Christ. Now, I will say to this movie's defense that the third act is by far the most interesting part of the whole thing, mostly because they have gone all insane, but they are actually teasing stuff in this that could have alluded to a movie that was much more interesting than what we're currently having in this movie. But that would have meant switching genres entirely. And this is also the biggest problem with this movie. It doesn't quite know what it is, so it tries to fulfill everybody's desires for it, which of course means that it fulfills no one's desire, because this movie is too serious to feel like a fun adventure movie, and it is too much of a nonsense comedy to really be taken serious, and the heartfelt moment that exists here are not allowed to simmer properly, so they don't mean anything. And as I said, I hate cop-outs so much, and I don't know how many they had in this, but they had sure a lot of them. And Jesus Christ, this movie was a chore to get through. Either make a smaller, make a more compact movie that tells a smaller story with a bigger scope, like a Greenland, or make an ensemble piece that actually has an ensemble piece feeling towards itself, like Don't Look Up, because we sure as hell doesn't have any Jennifer Lawrence or Leonardo DiCaprio or Meryl Streep or Jonah Hill in this thing. We are left with these numbnuts, so that's not a very good thing. By the way, I should also mention that Halle Berry, however awful she is in this movie, actually is responsible for a very unexpected joke that actually made me belly laugh. It was very unexpected, and I was very happy that this joke that seemed very simple but came out of nowhere and actually made me quite happy for a few little minutes. By the way, it should also be mentioned that a few of the good things this movie actually have is the visual storytelling that they have in the ending of this movie in the third act, but it's too little too late, and this movie should have been more of a sci-fi movie that deals with the asinine nonsense that they're doing in the third act. But in this case, we're stuck with it at the same time as we're having car chases in Colorado with the assholes that is chasing Michael Pena and all that good stuff. They're out there and hunting for bunkers and stuff like that, the bunkers from Deep Impact, which is actually one of the few disaster movies I've seen that actually worse than this thing is. Out of all the bad disaster movies that Ronald Emmerich has done, this is by far the worst he has ever done. It's still not as bad as Godzilla, but that might be because I had such high expectations on Godzilla when it came out, and it was such a disappointment that because of that alone, maybe that is the reason why this movie is actually a slightly bit better, or it is because that we are left at least without the presence of Matthew Broderick. That's a lot of fish. Shut up, Broderick. Anyway, do I recommend this movie? I most certainly do not. If you want to see a good disaster blockbuster movie, Armageddon is your obvious choice. It's big, it's dumb, but it is also enormously entertaining, and it doesn't care how dumb it is. It is almost proud of how dumb it is, with an awesome cast and fantastic score. If you want to see a more modern equivalent, I would suggest Greenland, which is actually a very good movie made on a very small budget considering how much great visual storytelling they got into this one. And they told a smaller story in a more efficient way. And I thought Greenland was a multitude better than this movie was. This was just a really boring, unimaginative, unoriginal movie that sort of pretended that it was original. Why couldn't you make, you know, something better, Emmerich? Why can't you make a Stargate? Why can't you make a Universal Soldier? Why can't you make, you know, some kind of fascinating, you know, historical drama or something like that? I mean, one of the best movies you have ever done is Unknown, that came about, you know, a little bit over a decade ago, and that movie is great. This movie is most certainly not. Horrible performances, a horrible script, a unfocused mess, and special effects that are decent but unimaginative. And I've seen all of this before, but it used to be better. I felt bitter after watching this movie. And I think that one of the reasons that I got so mad at it is the fact that they had the goal of having an actual sequel baiting to this thing. I cannot understand why. This is complete insanity, and I am never going to watch this movie ever again as long as I live. What happened to you, Emmerich? You used to be so cool in the 90s, except of course for Godzilla. I don't know if it is fair or unfair of me to give Moonfall 16 points, but this is actually the rating I think this movie deserves. There are some stuff in this movie that is slightly more redeemable, but there is also so many things in this movie that is so utterly banana bread levels of nonsense. So yeah, 16 is gonna have to stay, I guess. There is just so many cliches in this movie. There is just so many rehashed things that I've seen before that has been done better. It is a movie that wants to be this big, epic sci-fi disaster adventure, but in the end becomes everything that you've seen before, with all its playfulness and the tension scraped away, and making this movie pasteurized, homogenized and sanitized to the point where nothing really matters, and we have characters we don't care the slightest about, and then the movie is over. Either make this movie a more compact and a smaller story with a shorter runtime, or make this a, you know, movie that is bigger, that wants to tell a bigger story. But since we don't get to see anything what happens on the outside world, it feels a little bit of they want to do two things at the same time, so they would end up doing neither of them. But I think that if, you know, Ronald Emmerich would have promised us that he would have made a much longer movie, because I'm afraid that he has to, you know, be on the lookout for snipers at that moment, because this movie just would not end, despite having a decent enough pace. But in the end of it, I was just so bored that I was happy that the movie was over, because at least I got to go home. So have you seen Moonfall? Do you like it as little as I do, or do you think that it is an unappreciated movie? Comment below, and I'll see you next time for, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.